I glanced at my watch. 3:15 p.m. It was almost time to pick up Kevin from school. I leaned against my chair, staring at the spreadsheet on the screen in front of me. With the cacophony of voices, typing and ringing of phones surrounding me from the other cubicles. I still had some work to do, but I figured I'd call it a day. It was Friday and I could wrap it up on Monday instead. I stood up, giving time to my lower back to adjust to the sudden shift of position. I put my keys in my pocket and turned off the computer, throwing a piece of crumpled up paper from my desk into the trash bin under. I rounded the corner, almost bumping into Katie. "Whoa, sorry about that." I stepped aside, smiling. "Going home already, Jack?" she asked, clutching the folders to her chest and shooting me a grin. I took this as a sign that she wanted to strike some small talk and decided to indulge her. "Yeah, I gotta pick my son up from school. Rachel and I wanted to take him and his friends to laser tag today. You should probably call it a day soon too. You've been working like crazy lately." I leaned against the cubicle to my left. "Yeah, I know." Her expression turned sour. "But I can't. Still got to finish a bunch of reports. Should be done by 5 p.m. though." I shook my head. "You're a workaholic, you know that?" She chuckled. "All right, well, I'll see you Monday then. You have a great weekend, Katie." "You too, Jack." She smiled and went her merry way, her heels resounding throughout the office with every step she took. I wondered for a moment how I managed to almost bump into her, considering the fact that no matter how loud the other employees' voices were, Katie's high heels were ear-splittingly louder, regardless of where she was. You could basically pinpoint where she was at any given time just from that. I went into the bathroom and after relieving myself, went to the sink to wash my hands. As I did so, I glanced at my own reflection and stopped scrubbing out of surprise of what I saw. I looked like I hadn't slept in days. Heavy, dark circles were beneath my eyes, and my face looked like I hadn't shaved in weeks, with gray hairs sticking out here and there. My hair was messy and greasy. Had I really come to work like that? I swiveled my head left and right, inspecting my face, baffled by my own looks. I had shaved that morning, and to the touch of the hand, my face was as smooth as a baby's butt. But in the reflection, it looked scruffy and unkempt. I leaned in closer, inspecting every detail, amused and perplexed at what I was seeing. I smiled in order to see how I looked like that, and then I froze. My reflection in the mirror was frozen. I stepped back, bumping into the stall with my back, gasping and blinking violently, trying to make this hallucination go away. But when I opened my eyes again, the reflection was still frozen as it was a few seconds ago. I leaned left and then right, staring in amazement at what was in front of me. It felt like I was looking at my own Skype video while it was frozen during a call. I leaned in again, placing my palm on the cold glass, figuring that this may not have been a mirror after all. This must be some kind of prank. A camera is somewhere in here, I thought to myself. I looked behind myself in the corners of the bathroom, still leaning against the mirror, and as I inspected the bathroom walls, I suddenly felt a strong grip on my wrist. I jerked my head back in the direction of the mirror, only to see my reflection had a furious look on his face. He was holding me by my wrist through the mirror so tightly that his knuckles were becoming white. I struggled to pull away from his grip, but before I could break free, he reached through the mirror with his other hand and grabbed me by the neck, pulling me closer. I tried screaming for help, but he squeezed too tightly and all that came out was a barely audible gasp. He was pulling me closer by the second, and I could now smell the stale sweat and booze on his breath so clearly that it only added to my asphyxiation. His face was merely inches away from mine now, and with one final effort, he jerked me towards himself with all his force. I closed my eyes, bracing myself for a crash with either my reflection's face or the mirror itself. But the impact never came, and instead I felt myself falling backwards on my ass. When I opened my eyes, I realized I was on the bathroom floor. I stood up as fast as I could with my back against the stall, my legs shaky, grabbing at my neck which was still throbbing, along with my wrist. I stared at my reflection in the mirror, seeing palpable fear in my own eyes. It no longer had the scruffy look, but resembled that of my real self from this morning. I stood there for what felt like a very long time, and when I saw that my reflection wasn't making any movements different than my own, I dumbly waved my hand in front of it. The reflection mirrored my own movement perfectly, putting me at ease a little bit. Just then, another employee walked inside, shooting me a suspicious glance before heading into one of the stalls. I collected myself, looking at the reflection one more time and tidying up before heading out. "You okay, Jack?" Katie asked me with a concerned look on her face. Yeah, I nodded. "Are you already done for the day?" she asked. I frowned. Yeah. We talked about this a few minutes ago, remember? I gotta pick up Kevin from school." Her look of concern changed to one of confusion now. She opened her mouth as if to say something, and then closed it. "Well, I should get back to work." She gave me a PR smile and left, her hurried footsteps echoing throughout the office. I left the office workspace and turned left down the hallway. "See you Monday, Mark." I waved to a coworker who had passed by. "You're going home?" He turned around to face me. "Yeah, you try not to work too hard either, yeah?" I turned to face him while backpedaling and then continued in the direction I started. Jack?" Mark called my name. When I looked back at him, he was standing in the middle of the hallway with the same concerned look on his face like Katie. "Yeah?" I asked with a fake smile on my face. "The elevator's this way." He pointed behind himself with his thumb. "What are you talking about? That part is under renovation. See, the elevator's over." I turned around and pointed in the direction I was originally facing and then stopped mid-sentence. At the far end of the hallway from wall to wall was a "Do Not Cross" tape, marking a clear border between the pristine floor and the one littered with dust and other powdery material. I started, staring at the tape and then turning back to Mark and looking behind his shoulder. Yeah, my bad. You're right, the exit is the other way." "Are you feeling okay, Jack?" Mark asked. Yeah, I just, got confused a little bit is all." I chuckled and waved my hand in dismissal. "All right, man. Well, you take care. I'll see you Monday." Mark forced a visibly fake smile and disappeared in the office space before I could even utter a "you too" properly. I looked back at the renovated area and then at the office door. What was going on today? First the hallucination in the mirror, now forgetting where the elevator was. I had been working here for 2 years now, and there's no way the elevator could just switch places like that. Then again, I never went to the other side of this floor, so maybe there were 2 elevators and the main one was simply not functional. I shrugged those thoughts away and decided I'd take a nap as soon as I got back home. But the strange occurrences didn't stop there. On my way out of the building, I couldn't find my car at first, and it was only after the security guard came to ask what was going on that he was able to point me to my car, all the way on the other side of the parking lot. I thanked him, probably looking like a madman to him, and made my way out of there. My son's school was close by, so I drove there, but when I arrived to my destination and parked my car, instead of the school being on my right, it was across the street. At this point, I started to worry a little bit. Had I suffered a head injury in the bathroom and now all the information in my mind was jumbled up? My thoughts were interrupted when I glanced to my right and saw an old lady who was standing on the sidewalk, staring in my direction blankly. I ignored her and took off my seatbelt. I got out of the car, and the sound of children's playful voices instantly filled the air, along with the occasional adults shouting warnings to the kids. I looked to the right, and the old lady was still staring at me with her unrelenting gaze. I nodded to her, to which she didn't respond. What is it with old people? I thought to myself, and crossed the street, getting to the front of the school, where children in large numbers were exiting the building and making their way home, some alone and some looking for their parents. I recognized some of Kevin's classmates and figured Kevin himself would be out any moment. I waited a few minutes with my hands in my pocket, occasionally glancing at my watch. Then one of the adults came out. It was Mrs. Steiner, Kevin's teacher. I approached her, and when she looked up from her purse and caught my glance, she froze in place, staring at me with a blank expression on her face. "Mr. Conley," she said, "is there something I can help you with?" Yeah, I said, surprised that I even needed to explain. "I'm here to pick up Kevin. Is he still inside?" Her blank expression changed to that of serious concern. She stared at me for a few seconds before saying, "Are you here to pick up some of Kevin's belongings? Did he leave anything at school?" "No, what? No, I'm here for Kevin." At this point, I was probably as confused as she was. "I think you need to leave now, Mr. Conley," she responded after a pause. "And I strongly believe you should get some help." She took a step forward, but I got in her way. "What? What are you talking about? Just tell me where Kevin is. Did something happen to him?" I insisted, furious and scared. She sighed. "I know the truth is hard to accept, and I am so sorry you had to go through that. But if you come here again, I will be forced to call security." She tried to leave again, but I grabbed her by the arm, attracting the suspicious glances of some kids and adults nearby. Mrs. Steiner jerked her head in my direction. She looked like she was ready to pepper spray me by this moment. I let go of her arm, realizing suddenly that I was being too violent. "Mrs. Steiner, please, just tell me what happened to Kevin. Was he in an accident? Is he all right?" I pleaded. She stared at me for a moment, as if to contemplate what she should do, and then she said, "Mr. Conley, I'm sorry, but your son died 6 months ago." "Is this a fucking joke?" I shouted louder than I intended, attracting more glares around me. Mrs. Steiner was clearly shocked, but said nothing. "Where's Kevin?" I demanded. "Kevin!" I frenetically spun around, looking for my son, completely disregarding the scared kids and parents who were holding their children close to themselves and evacuating the school. "Mr. Conley, please," Mrs. Steiner interjected, but I ignored her, calling Kevin's name over and over. "Where's Kevin? Where's my son?" I paced back and forth around the schoolyard, while people were avoiding me in a large arch. 2 security guards rushed in, and before I knew it, I was forcefully being dragged out. Their pleas for me to leave, which later turned into threats about calling the police, fell on deaf ears as I kept trying to find Kevin. I ended up being thrown out, and when I tried to get back in, they blocked my path. "Please, I have to find my son." I tried to get past the guards, unable to control my panic. "Sir, I'm warning you, if you don't leave right away, I will be forced to call the authorities." He put his palm on my chest, pushing me back. That finally snapped my full attention to him, and with hesitation, I returned to my car. I had to call my wife Amanda. She would assure me that everything was okay, right? She had to. I whipped out my phone, scrolling through my contacts. I dialed her phone number, glancing out the car window in the direction of the guards who hadn't budged from their location. They were still shooting me suspicious looks, probably waiting for me to leave. I waited for Amanda's phone to start ringing, but it never came. I looked at the screen and saw that the call had been disconnected. I dialed again, but the same thing happened. I slammed the phone on the steering wheel out of frustration and put it back in my pocket. She was home, so I just had to go there. Maybe she already picked Kevin up and this was all an elaborate prank. I remember hoping against hope that that was the case. I put the keys in the ignition and started up my car. I drove off with screeching tires, probably attracting the glances of even more people along the way. It took everything in my power not to run all red lights on the way home, but I knew in my hot-headed state that being pulled over by the police would only exacerbate the situation. When I finally pulled up in front of my house, I got out of the car so fast that the seatbelt initially pulled me back. I slammed the car door and strode to the entrance, forcefully trying to open the door. It was locked. I put my keys inside, but they didn't fit for some reason. I rang the bell and then knocked 3 times loudly, shouting, "Amanda, are you home?" The sound of key turning was heard on the other end and the door opened, but it wasn't Amanda. In front of me stood my neighbor Nick. Jack, everything okay? He asked worriedly, holding the door with one hand. As soon as I glanced behind my neighbor inside his home, I realized what a huge error I've made. I was looking at my neighbor's home and not my own. Oh, I'm so sorry, Nick. Drinking already, Jack? He smiled and tried to shrug it off as a joke. I chuckled nervously. Yeah, sorry about the disturbance. Hope I didn't interrupt anything. Don't worry about it, buddy. Take it easy, will ya? Yeah, you too. I smiled and turned around to cross the street where my home actually was. I approached the door and tried to open it. Locked. I pulled out my keys and hesitantly put them in, and sure enough, they fit like a glove. I pushed the door gently, revealing the dim interior. What I saw inside was my home, and yet it wasn't. The foyer floor had my shoes scattered all over the floor. Amanda always made sure the foyer was tidy and the shoes organized, so this looked like she had been away for a while. There was dirt on the floor, indicating that whoever had gone in hadn't bothered to wipe their shoes first. The living room had barely any sunlight gleaming through. I shut the door, further decreasing the natural light inside. Amanda? Kevin? I shouted and held my breath, waiting for a response or any noise. None came. I went inside the living room and again was faced with the feeling of surrealism at what I saw. Everything was exactly how I had left it this morning, but some things were off. There were discarded booze bottles on the table and under it. Some flipped over, the contents spilled and dried on the carpet. There were grease-stained papers and bags from fast food all over the place. What the fuck happened here? Amanda is crazy about keeping the place as clean as an operating room, so to have her leave it like this indicated that something was very wrong here. I approached the table and saw a flipped-over photo next to the half-eaten burger. I picked it up and inspected it. It was a picture of Kevin. I stared at it and suppressed the tears welling up in my eyes. I was confused by everything and scared. Scared for myself and for my wife and son. I was afraid I'd never get to see them and hear their voices again. Just then, I heard a vibration in front of me, and moving the food papers away, I saw a cell phone. It was my own cell phone, no doubt about it. I unlocked it, revealing dozens of missed calls and messages. Most of the messages were people asking me where I was and if I was all right. As I scrolled through, I saw that some messages were from Amanda. The first thing that struck me as odd and confirmed my suspicions was the fact that she was in my contacts simply under the name Amanda rather than wife. I read her messages as fast as I could. Jack, are you okay? Hey, call me back when you get this. Why aren't you answering? I'm starting to worry. There were missed calls from her as well. I called her number and waited for the phone to ring. After just one ring, she picked up. Jack, is that you? Her voice resounded on the other end. Amanda, yeah, it's me. Where are you? Where am I? Where are you? Do you know how long you've been gone? Your disappearance was filed to the police. They're looking for you. What? Amanda, listen, I don't know what's going on, but where's Kevin? I went to pick him up from school and then everything just got jumbled up. Mrs. Steiner said he's dead. Amanda, what's going on here? Where's our son? I heard Amanda sigh over the phone. Jack, I think you should get help. Listen, I have to go. It's best we... Amanda, please. Can we please just talk about this? I don't know what's going on and I feel like I'm losing my mind. I can't remember anything. Please. There was silence over the phone and then she said, I'll be there in 20 minutes, but I don't have much time. Thank you. I hung up and stared at nothing for a while. Would I finally get some answers when she arrived? In the meantime, I decided I should check the rest of the house. I went up the stairs and into the bedroom. It was almost as messy as the living room, with bottles of liquor on the nightstand and on the floor. Dirty clothes were piled up in the corner of the room, and the bed sheets were hanging off the side of the bed. The curtains were draped over the windows, dimming the room entirely. The whole room reeked of booze and sweat. I noticed that all of Amanda's belongings had been removed from the room and only mine remained. Before I exited, I noticed some meds on the night table next to the half-emptied liquor bottle. antidepressants, and sleeping pills. I left the room and closed the door, immediately eliminating the odor coming from inside. I went down the hallway and slowly approached the door on the right. I grabbed the knob and hesitated. I took a deep breath and pushed the door open, revealing the interior of the room. Kevin's room was exactly how I remembered it. Everything was in place and tidy, contrasting the rest of the house's abominable mess. His bed was made, and school books rested upon the desk facing the window. Sunlight gleamed inside, like a sanctuary of light from the darkness in the house. The TV screen reflected dust from sunlight, and on the floor below was his console with a single game neatly resting atop it. I looked around, absorbing my surroundings, inexplicable sadness suddenly overcoming me. "Where are you, Kevin? What happened to you?" Tears welled up on my eyes again, and I turned around before I could allow myself to start crying and closed the door firmly. If I could, I'd build a wall over the door just so I wouldn't have to look at it again and be painfully reminded of my loss. Before I could process that thought clearly, I heard the doorbell ring. I ran down the stairs as fast as I could and opened the door, letting in a gust of fresh air. "Hello, Jack." Amanda looked like hell. Her hair was unkempt, and she had heavy bags under her eyes. Her skin was pale, and she looked like she had lost a lot of weight. "Amanda," I said dumbly, staring at her. I hadn't even thought about how I should behave when she arrives. Do I hug her? Do I act friendly? According to what I knew, we seemed to be living apart, so I had to test the waters first. "Can I come in?" she asked. Yeah, sure." I snapped back to reality and stepped aside, letting her in. She took off her shoes, glancing at the dirty foyer along the way, and then went straight to the living room. I knew she was probably disgusted by the mess in front of her. "Sorry about the mess," I said. It's all right," she said, standing uncomfortably in the middle of the room. I cleared the table and sat on the couch, telling her to feel free to do the same. She sat opposite me and looked around at the room once more. "Amanda, I have a lot of questions." I swallowed and leaned in, jumping into the topic right away. "Likewise, you just disappeared a week ago. Where did you go?" She looked at me judgmentally. "I have no idea what you're talking about. Listen, I was at work just now, and I know it doesn't make sense, but I was supposed to pick up Kevin from school, and we had plans for the weekend for him and his friends. I finished work earlier, and all of a sudden everything got confusing. Mrs. Steiner said he died when I went to pick him up, and I don't... Laser tag." "What?" "We were going to take him and his friends to laser tag." Amanda smiled. "Yes, that's it. I went to pick him up, and everything else was just a mess. Nothing is where I remember it to be, and people look at me strangely. I don't get it." "Jack, that was 6 months ago. That was the day Kevin died." I stared, dumbfounded. I had somehow traveled 6 months into the future and completely forgot about everything during that time. Amanda continued, "Jack, this is clearly a coping mechanism. You suppressed everything from that day on to deal with Kevin's death. I understand it, but you need help. You can't run from this." How did he die?" She stared at me and her expression turned from judgmental to hateful. "You killed him, Jack," she said through her teeth. The next few days were a blur. I spent the majority of my days drinking and sleeping. I kept replaying the conversation with Amanda in my mind over and over. "You killed Kevin, Jack." "No, that can't be true. You're lying." "It's true, Jack. You were speeding and the car brakes didn't work and you survived unscathed, but Kevin, there was barely anything left of him." She started crying. No. I grabbed my head, pacing around, feeling like my heart was going to explode. "It was an accident, Jack. You didn't mean to kill him, but I never forgave you." I exhaled sharply, wiping my tears. "So you decided to leave me?" I asked. "I had to get away. The house brought too many painful memories for me, and you were in your own world as well, drinking yourself unconscious daily, and I had to get away from all of it." I wish I could say that Amanda and I had a reconciliation and that she forgave me. But by the time she left, we were both heavy-hearted and tired from crying. I had no strength to ask her to stay, even though I wanted her to be with me through such a difficult time. I saw the resentment in her eyes and knew better than to ask. I hated myself for ruining our family, and I hated myself for not remembering my child's death. I knew it was probably poetic justice for me to go through this pain for the second time, but I begged God to take it away. The pain was so excruciating and exhausting that I even contemplated ending my life with pills. And then, 3 days after my meetup with Amanda, I woke up at 3 p.m. with a hangover and went into the bathroom to clear myself up. I looked in the mirror and saw what an empty husk I've become. My hair was messy, my beard unkempt and scruffy, the bags under my bloodshot eyes adding to my age. I didn't care about it though. I bent down to wash my face, and when I stood up, I sobered up immediately at what I saw. In front of me was my own reflection, and yet it wasn't my own. The person in front of me looked clean and tidy, with perfectly shaved face, healthier skin tone, and neat hair. Suddenly, I remembered what transpired at my work bathroom a few days ago. I had been grieving and completely misplaced it from my mind. I stared at my reflection and its lack of blemishes, and my anger boiled. I was angrier than I had ever been before in my life. It was this reckless son of a bitch who took everything from me, and I hated him for that. I wanted nothing more than to reach into the mirror and bash his head on the sink over and over, until only a bloody, unrecognizable pulp remained. This urge was so irresistible that I felt myself unwillingly raising my hand and diving it into the mirror, grabbing the wrist of the other Jack with force I never knew I had. My reflection suddenly looked scared for his life, and it fed into my sadistic satisfaction of wanting to hurt him. I reached with my other hand as well and grabbed him by the neck, squeezing tightly. I started pulling him towards me, with the intention of dragging him over to my side and brutally murdering him. I yanked him with all my might, and just before he uncontrollably crashed into me, I felt myself stumbling backwards. I stood up, looking at my reflection, ready to grab him once more, but he was gone. Just my own dirty reflection remained. I sighed, leaving the bathroom and heading into the bedroom, stumbling on my bed face first. "Honey, is everything okay?" I heard a voice which put all my senses on edge. Had I imagined that? "Honey," the voice repeated, a familiar, soothing voice. It was Amanda. I rushed downstairs, practically jumping down the last 5 steps, and sure enough, there she was. But not the Amanda I saw a few days ago, but my Amanda as I knew her before. Beautiful, happy, perfect. "Jack, what happened to you?" She looked at me with confusion. "Is this a costume or something? You're Jack the hobo now?" She chuckled. I stared at her in bafflement. My brain couldn't process what I was seeing. "Jack?" She shot me a suspicious glance. Yeah?" I asked. "Are you gonna pick Kevin up or not? He's almost done in school." I opened my mouth dumbly and then closed it, muttering a weak what? "Your son, Kevin. You're supposed to pick him up. He has laser tag today, remember?" She repeated in a slower tone. Right. I ran for my keys, feeling a surge of ecstasy overwhelming me. "I'm supposed to pick up Kevin, that's right." "Jack, wait," Amanda started, but I was already in the car. The urge to run the red lights was even stronger than last time, but I resisted it, especially since I knew I was responsible for Kevin's death by driving. The school was not where I remembered it to be, though. It wasn't across the street this time either. It was all the way on the other end of the street. This raised some suspicions with me, but I ignored them. I didn't care. Kevin was alive. That's all that mattered. I ran to the school and didn't even need to look. There he was, just how I remembered him the day he left for school when I last saw him. He smiled widely when he saw me and ran to me. I embraced him tightly, telling him how much I've missed him, and that I'll never let him go. When I finally let him go, holding back tears of joy, he simply wrinkled his nose and said, "Dad, you stink." I laughed, kissing him on the forehead, and pretty soon he and I were on the way to the car. As I let him in and closed the door, I heard a voice behind me. "Don't do it." I turned around and it was the same old lady I saw a few days ago in the same spot, the one who was staring at me from the pavement. "He's not your son, Jack." She shook her head. "You know that well. You're taking someone else's son. Don't do it." I scoffed. I was caught by surprise so suddenly that it took me a moment to respond. "Listen, lady, I don't know who you think you are, but you need to mind your own business, all right? Now, if you'll excuse me, you're not in your own world. Your son is alive, and there's still time to save him. You just..." "All right, that's enough," I yelled, and rushed inside the car, ignoring Kevin's worried gaze as we sped out of there. "Are you okay, Dad?" Kevin asked. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw that the old lady still staring at me. "Yeah, I'm fine, buddy. You ready to kick some ass in laser tag?" I asked, much to his enthusiasm. A few minutes later, we pulled up in front of the house and Amanda was standing in front of the entrance, smiling. "There you are," she said. "Did your dad drive recklessly?" Kevin looked at me and I shook my head, winking at him. "All right, let's get you inside. Lunch is ready," Amanda said. I stared at them, the two people who meant everything to me in the world, and I suddenly got the instinctive urge to turn around. As I did, there she was, across the street, the old lady from school. She stood there, our gazes meeting. She shook her head slowly. I sighed and looked back at Amanda taking off Kevin's backpack as he was telling her about something that happened at school. I could just live with my family, even if it was fake, and no one would ever know the difference. I glanced at the old lady again. "Hey, Amanda, do you think you could take Kevin to laser tag? I have something to take care of." "What? Now? But this was your idea. I thought you wanted to do this," she said. "I know, and I do. I'll be there later, I promise." I approached Amanda and put my hands on her face, kissing her gently. I knelt down and ruffled Kevin's hair, saying, "You listen to your mom now, all right?" As I opened the car door, I looked at them one more time. "You promised, Dad. Don't be late, and we're getting pizza later," Kevin said, smiling widely. "Yeah, otherwise we'll have to go on without you." Amanda smiled along with him, ushering him inside. I smiled back bitterly and watched until the door closed behind. I looked at the old lady. She was still staring at me. I did a U-turn and stopped the car in front of her. "Get in," I said to the old lady after rolling the window down. She got in, smiling for the first time since I saw her. "I knew you'd make the right call, Jack," she said. "Who are you really? How do you know me?" I asked, putting my cup of coffee on the table. The cafe we were in had a plethora of young people in it, filling the interior with their voices, allowing the old lady and me to talk in peace. "I know everything about you, Jack. I know what you've been through lately. The strange events that took place in the mirrors. You know about that?" "Yes, and that's why I'm here. What was done has to be undone. You probably figured it out by now. Most of it, anyway." I shook my head, confused. I glanced at the other tables to make sure no one was eavesdropping. Even though the topic of our conversation would most likely just have people dismiss us as lunatics, even if they heard something, I still felt like a student who was cheating on an exam and afraid of being caught. All I know is strange things started happening a few days ago, and I feel like I'm losing my mind. Nothing is where it was supposed to be. I went to pick my son up and the school was across the street. I went home and it was my neighbor's house. It's like... I trailed off. "Like you've entered a mirror?" She finished my sentence, blank expression on her face. "Yeah, and then my son was dead and my wife and I were divorced." "What's going on here exactly?" She leaned back in her chair, never breaking eye contact. "You switched places with the Jack from a different mirrorverse." "Mirrorverse? You mean multiverse?" "No, I mean mirrorverse. That's what the scientists call it. Similar to the multiverse, there are worlds out there. Millions and millions of infinite worlds, all the same and all different. You've seen them." I stared at her, expecting her to continue. "Jack, being able to travel from one world to another is an extremely rare gift." but for some reason, you seem to have it. You're able to see into those worlds and even enter them, but going in and out is not good. Why? Why is it not good? I was sitting on the edge of my seat, probably wide-eyed while she looked like she was talking about something nonchalant like recipes for cooking. She continued, "It creates an imbalance. It creates distortions and paradoxes in other worlds. We can't allow that to happen. The Mirrorverse where Kevin is dead, Jack got his son killed in an accident. It may have happened a million other times to a million other Kevins, but none of them would have the impact on balance like that specific one. He is the starting point of everything." I took a sip of my coffee, giving fluid to my dry throat. She inhaled and continued, "It may have happened to a million other Jacks, but they would simply mourn Kevin's death and move on. Some of them would stay in an unhappy marriage. Some would get divorced, and most of them would commit suicide or die from alcohol and drug abuse. But not this Jack. He couldn't come to terms with what he did. So one day, he accidentally saw you in the mirror, a version of himself which still had a happy family, and he was overtaken by anger. He hated himself, so he tried to kill you and inadvertently switched places with you, and then realized Kevin was alive in your world. So he wants a world where Kevin is still alive and Amanda is with him? He wants to have a happy family again?" For a moment, I felt pity and understanding for my imposter. She shook her head. "Not exactly. He's lost his mind. He believes his son was taken from him. He can't cope with the fact that he lost his own son, and he hates himself for it so much that he wants to punish every version of himself in every world." "How?" "By killing Kevin in all the worlds." "What?" My shout attracted a few glances for a moment. "He wants to punish all the Jacks in all the worlds by taking the most precious thing away from them." "But we switched worlds days ago." "Oh God, if he picked up Kevin, then your son is still alive, but we don't have much time, Jack." I felt a surge of panic coursing through my entire body like electricity. I had to go and save Kevin now. "Don't worry, he's still okay, and we still have time to save him," she reassured me after noticing my fear. "And I know exactly where to find him." The panic I felt before started to abate, and I leaned in my chair, scratching my beard, looking at the old lady. All these things just seemed so far-fetched. Different worlds and mirrors which you can travel through, having millions of doppelgangers out there. This all seemed like a movie script, and I never even stopped to ask myself if I was maybe losing my mind. Maybe this lady was just as crazy as I was, and was feeding into my illusion. Everything she said made sense, but somehow it was still hard to believe. "Who are you, lady?" I asked. She shrugged. "Just a guardian. I try to keep a balance in all the mirrorverses. That is, and always was, my duty." "So why can't you do something about this? Can't you just return us all to our own worlds or something?" She shook her head. "No, Jack. I can't meddle in these affairs. I can offer assistance, but you must be the one to restore balance." "And what happens to the Jack I switched places with today? For all we know, there could be hundreds or thousands of others who did the same. The first Jack may have started an infinite loop," I said. "It all begins and ends with Jack who took your life away. Once you do what must be done, everything will return to normal and balance will be restored. He can't be allowed to cause any more damage. He has to be stopped." "What is it that I must do? How do I stop him?" I turned my palms towards her in an asking manner, getting impatient. She leaned in so that we were so close to each other, I could see every pore in her face, her unrelenting gaze locked with mine. "You must kill him, Jack," she whispered. "It is the only way." I sat in the car, holding a mirror in my lap. The old lady was next to me. The sunny day slowly turned into a gray one, bringing with it the droplets or rain which resounded on the roof of my car. "I don't understand what I'm supposed to do here." I shook my head, looking at the lady. I felt like a teenager in a driving test, and she was the instructor, but unlike my actual instructor, she was very patient. "Stare directly in the mirror," she said. "What do you see?" I stared at my dumbfounded face, shaking my head once more. Myself? I said, unsure. Good. Now, try to remember what the first Jack looked like. Remember what he did to you and how he took your life away. And once you start feeling an overwhelming emotion, either sadness, anger, hate, or such, reach into the mirror. Try it. I glanced at the mirror and then felt her hand on my shoulder. Remember, she said, no matter what happens, you must kill him. Otherwise, this was all for nothing. I stared at the mirror once more, trying to remember the Jack in the work bathroom mirror. He looked back then very much like I did now. Messy hair, unkempt beard, pale face, but more so, and I distinctly remember smelling booze on his breath. The anger I felt earlier towards him was gone and was instead replaced by profound empathizing sadness, which a father who lost his child could understand. I saw my own reflection changing, hair and beard slightly growing and bags under the eyes becoming heavier. Without further thinking, I slowly and gently reached into the mirror. I felt the cold glass touching my knuckles as the mirror stopped my hand from going through. I dropped the mirror back onto my lap and shook my head in frustration. I don't think this is gonna work. When I looked to my right, the old lady was gone. I looked around and saw her nowhere in the streets. A few people were walking by with umbrellas, but that was it. I then realized I was on the other side of the street. Or rather, the street was inverted. I knew immediately I was back in my own world. I started the car and slowly drove off. The lady said they would be at the corner of this one street that sold video games at exactly 5:12. I felt my jacket to see if my gun was still there, very careful not to somehow lose it along the way. I had to sneak into the house while Amanda and Kevin were gone to retrieve it, and I did not feel content by having to use it, let alone kill someone. But in the end, my son's life was at stake. Knots started twisting in my stomach, anxiety like before a big test or presentation, and with each mile I got closer, it only got worse. I tried to keep Kevin's face in my mind's eye in order to prevent myself from chickening out in case I really had to pull the trigger. I arrived at my destination soon and parked the car further away to avoid suspicion from the other Jack. It was 5:05. The street was empty, and the sounds of occasional cars driving across the wet roads were heard in the adjacent streets. The video game store at the corner was the one where I would regularly take Kevin to buy him games, so I kept a close eye on it. 5:12. Two people emerged from the shop, an adult man and a child, Jack and Kevin. It was surreal seeing myself with my son there, as if I was watching a hyper-realistic movie. Kevin had a smile on his face and was pointing to the game in his hands, telling Jack something. My doppelganger listened closely, saying something in return, smiling equally. He looked a lot healthier and cleaner than last time. Seeing them together like that, this imposter with my son made anger surge through me and all feelings of anxiety were gone. This was my time to shine. I stepped forward on the pavement towards them. They hadn't seen me yet. "Jack!" I called out to my copy and saw his smile drop when he realized who he was looking at. Kevin seemed perplexed as well, looking at the both of us, wildly swiveling his head left and right. Without a word, Jack picked up Kevin and started running. "Stop!" I shouted, sprinting after them. They ran around the corner and disappeared in the crowd of people in front. I pushed my way through the herd, much to the cursing and frustration of them. Jack was running straight towards a police officer, so he turned inside a nearby building. He could have just told the cop there was a crazy man with a gun after him, but I guess he panicked. Also, he did not know I had a gun on me. I followed closely, and when I went inside, they were gone. The light above the elevator was on though, and it showed they were going to the top floor. I was already exhausted from running, but decided I had no choice but to run 10 floors up. I climbed the stairs as fast as I could, making sure along the way the elevator wasn't stopping or changing directions. When I finally arrived, I saw them exiting the door that leads to the roof. Thank God for slow elevators, I thought to myself, and followed them. I felt the cold air and droplets on my face once more, and immediately looked for my son. Jack and Kevin stood at the edge of the roof. Kevin scared and Jack wide-eyed, panicking. "You can't have him," he shouted, holding my son's hand firmly. "Dad, no!" Kevin cried, looking at the evil Jack. "It's okay, Kevin. Everything's gonna be okay," I shouted over the sudden wind, which became strong. I slowly stepped closer. "Stay back!" he shouted, pulling Kevin closer and taking one step towards the edge. "This has to end, Jack," I said, taking another step closer. "You don't understand," he shouted back. "You can't understand what I've been through." "I do understand, Jack. I know what happened, and I felt the same pain you did when you lost Kevin. The brakes didn't work and the car crashed. It wasn't your fault, Jack." He looked down and then at Kevin. He looked like he was on the verge of tears. "I'm sorry, he started. "It's okay, it's not too late, but you have to stop this. Kevin did nothing wrong. You need to let him go." Jack looked at Kevin and then knelt down in front of him. He hugged him and said, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean for all this to happen. You mean the world to me and I let you down." He let go and stood up. Kevin stepped back, and they shared a moment of exchanged glances. Then, a loud bang echoed on the roof. Jack looked down at his chest and saw a red stain which increased by the second, and then he glanced at me. I lowered my gun, my hands shaking so hard that I could barely hold it. Jack looked at Kevin before he simply collapsed on his back, eyes still open. Kevin screamed and I rushed to embrace him. I comforted him as I watched Jack's body fade before me, and I wondered if this outcome was really necessary. The rest of the day was a blur. I was just happy to have Kevin back and knew that despite the trauma he had just been through, he would be okay. Amanda insisted he had a bad dream and that seeing two Jacks was not possible. I agreed with her and comforted my son. That night I put Kevin to sleep in his room. I tucked him in and he looked at me and said, "Dad, I once had a similar dream to the one today." I smiled. "Oh yeah, was it scary?" "I don't know. You were fighting with your twin and I woke up before it ended." "Well, don't worry. If my evil twin does come, I'll kick his ass." Just then, Amanda came to the door. "Jack, there's someone at the door," she said. "It's for you." It was 10 p.m. already, so I wondered who it could be, but I had some idea. When I opened the door, sure enough, the old lady was there. I wasn't really glad to see her, but at the same time, I was really grateful for what she did for me. "Got 5 minutes for a walk, Jack?" she asked. I nodded. I closed the door behind me and followed her down the street. "Well, you did it, Jack," she said. "You got your life back." "Yeah, but was killing him really necessary?" I asked. "I'm afraid so. Payment was required." "Payment? What do you mean?" She stopped and turned towards me. "Jack, I haven't been fully honest with you. When the Jack you killed started messing with the Mirrorverse, he did some irreversible damage. Payment was required. Balance had to be restored. The Jack who took your son didn't start a killing spree, and it never was his intention. I lied about that. He simply wanted a life where he would have his son back." "But you said..." "I know. If I had told you the truth, you never would have done what needed to be done." She paced around. "This was the only way. But that's not all, Jack." I stared at her in silence, the feeling of dread forming at the pit of my stomach once more. She continued. "When you killed Jack today, you started an unstoppable cycle. In exactly 6 months, a Jack from one of the Mirrorverses will enter your world and kill you." I widened my eyes, opening my mouth, ready to interject, but she interrupted. "You can't stop it, Jack. I'm sorry. A life was traded for a life, and I know how miserable you would have been without your son. So I did you a favor and traded your life for Kevin's. Don't you think that's fair?" I didn't even know how to start processing this. I opened my mouth dumbly once more and then closed it, swallowing spit through my dry throat. I looked down at my shoes and listened as she continued. "I suggest you spend your remaining time with your family. Don't travel through mirrors anymore, for I fear the damage could be even greater this time. Live the rest of your life to the fullest. And Jack, I looked up at her to see her smiling. "Thank you," she said as she turned around and disappeared into thin air.